Hello Flosstube and welcome back to another video. I'm Ros Clark, this is Ros Clark Craft. You can find me as Ros Clark Craft here on YouTube, over on Instagram and also at my shop on Etsy. Welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new here. It's been very exciting to have growing numbers of subscribers. In the last month, I think my subscriber number has more or less doubled. I mean, it's still only 200 and something, but nonetheless, that's a pretty exciting rate. And if it continues to double at that rate every month, I don't know, it's one of those maths problems, isn't it? In 10 years' time, it'll probably be the entire world subscribed to my channel. Anyway, if you haven't subscribed, but you watch and you enjoy what you're watching here, I would love it if you would click that subscribe button. If you also want to click the notification bell to know when I've got another video coming out, then do that. I'm not ever, I think, going to be one of those people who has like a reliable posting schedule. I'm always really impressed when people say, and on Monday I'll have another video coming out about this, and on Tuesday I'll have this, and then on Thursday I'll talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, my everyday life is not that regular. My work life is definitely not that regular. And so my filming schedule is never going to be that regular either. At the moment, I'm posting maybe once every 10 days, but this is unusual. I would say much more normally between 3 and 4 weeks. So we'll see how that develops over the future. There is a little bit of a backlist, but not a huge one. If you want to go back and see previous videos, you're very welcome to do that. So what else? Oh, before I get going on things I have to show you today, I just wanted to add a comment about comments on my last couple of videos. It's been really great to have so many people leave such thoughtful and considered comments about the various issues that I've been discussing. Do go back and read them if you haven't already. So many different perspectives on what people like to see in a Flosstube video, what makes them feel included or excluded from the community, how people choose to spend their money and talk about that or not talk about that. Marie from Stitches and Diamonds made a really important point. She said, you know, one of the reasons she likes to share haul is so that she can help to support the designers and the small businesses that she values. And I really get that. And I really appreciate, of course, everybody who's mentioned my designs and my small business and my YouTube channel. So I'm not in any way saying that any of that is bad. And I want to just say that again, I think really clearly. None of what I've talked about in the previous videos is meant to feel like a judgmental comment on anybody else. There is no right way to Flosstube, and there is no right way to cross stitch unless it's making you unhappy. You don't have to make me happy. Just do it the way that makes you happy. And if you find that someone else's videos are not making you happy, maybe they're making you feel envious or, you know, just sad that you don't have as much money in your budget to spend on cross-stitch things, well, stop watching those videos. Find other ones. Find ones with people stitching more stuff like you, or people not talking about their haul or whatever. Just do it in the way that suits you. But I'm not here for judgment in my videos or in the comments, really. There's a reason why somebody asked if there was an email they could respond to me on, and there isn't, partly because I don't want this to be a conversation between me and you individually. I want it to be an open conversation. If you have something to say, leave it in the comments. Feel free to chat in the comments to each other and think about the different comments that everyone has made, not just me. Anyway, so today what do I have? Well, I have a fully finished object, which is also a pattern release. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen that already. I have another finished but not fully finished object. I have a work in progress. I have 2 finished but not fully finished objects. I must go and grab the other one. I have work in progress and some thoughts about that. And I don't exactly have thinky thoughts today, but I am going to talk a little bit about my design process, because I thought some of you might be interested in hearing about that. I'm going to do that at the end. So we'll work through all the stitching stuff first, and then we'll have thinky thoughts at the end. There isn't any other art or craft this week. Art was cancelled last week because teacher is not very well. And I have been crazy busy with work recently and other things too. And so I've just not had time to do anything else. Maybe next time I will try and have some other things to talk about. But this week it's all cross stitch all the way. So here is my fully finished object, and I cannot tell you how delighted this makes me. Let me see if I can bring it in a little bit closer. There we go. So this is Elephantine. This is the second in my medieval menagerie series. The first one was cat snails. This one, as you can see, is based on medieval illuminations of elephants, some of which look more like elephants than others. You can see that. Let me bring that in closer again. So this one here, I think looks pretty much like an elephant, except the scale. Even the largest elements, I mean, I sort of scaled this down a bit in the design, but there was this whole tradition of elephants with castles on their back, hence Elephantine Castle. I mean, this isn't even a whole castle, but you can still see it's quite a substantial structure for that size of elephant. This little baby elephant with the sort of trunk at the end, I just think is adorable. This one, you can see they knew it was huge. They didn't quite understand what huge meant. And the trunk, I mean, it's just like no trunk you've ever seen on an actual elephant. And then this one here, which in my mind is sad elephant, very sad elephant. So that's why it's called Elephantine rather than just elephants, because these are based on illustrations from medieval illuminated manuscripts, most of which were drawn by people who had never seen an elephant. So what you would do is you'd hear about these elephants. You knew that elephants were a real thing, unlike the cat snails, which you knew were not a real thing. And people who had seen them on their travels would come back and describe these animals, and then the artist would draw them. And so you get the most bizarre and wonderful depictions of what these creatures might look like. They've all got the idea that they're big. They've all got something of a trunk. Some of them have got the ears, but not all of them. Some of them have got tusks. In fact, I think all the ones that I've copied have got tusks. Different ideas about what the tail might be like. Very different ideas, you can see in this one, what the feet might be like. So these are basically hooves on the original illustration. The colouring is my colouring. Medieval manuscripts, I mean, obviously they did have colours. They had quite a limited colour palette and they didn't really mix shades of colour. So I can't remember, the one of these I think did have this sort of colour palette, not very precisely. And the colour palette I've chosen, well, I'm going to talk about this a bit more later, but it's designed so that if you also stitch the cat snails chart, and then the one that's going to come after this in the series, which will be based on sea creatures, there is an overlapping colour palette. So it's not identical to cat snails, but it does have some overlap. And the idea is that if you wanted to, you could stitch all three and they would work well together. But the patterns on these, some of these are sort of taken from the manuscripts, like the sort of shading on that trunk. And that's what I've used to suggest the stripy pattern on here. This is one where there was, I think it was even just a line drawing rather than a painting. And there was a sort of pattern suggesting maybe kind of fur or feathers or something like that on the skin. So I put that in and then I've used shading around that. Yeah, but the colours are not as you would find them in the manuscripts. If you go to the Etsy listing, which I'll put in the link below, you'll see the images that I've used as the inspiration for these elephants in the actual medieval manuscripts. So in the pattern, you get this, and then you also get a second chart for a small. I've not stitched a small. I'm going to put a picture here. Let's take that down. This model was very, very kindly stitched for me by Yasmin from Yasmin's Made with Love. She's done an absolutely beautiful job of it. And you'll see it includes a version of this elephant, but without the people, a version of this baby elephant, and then another little baby elephant that doesn't appear on this chart at all stacked up together. And because those are a bit more elephanty, they are just called elephants. So you get both charts, the main chart and the small. It's PDF pattern only, and it's in Etsy. Etsy add VAT to everything that I sell there for people in the UK. That does mean the prices are a bit higher than I intended them to be, and I'm going to have a look and see if there's a way of stopping that, because I am not VAT registered. To be VAT registered, you have to have an annual turnover of £80,000. I don't have an annual turnover of £80,000. I don't know if there's any way of changing that on Etsy, but I will have a look and see if I can. But anyway, that is the only place you can find this pattern. If you're interested in stitching it, please do go and check out the Etsy shop and have fun with it. Mine is stitched in anchor threads. I've given in the chart an anchor and a DMC conversion. I've not given a fancy floss conversion for this or the other in the Medieval Menagerie series, and that's because in order to keep the sort of medieval illuminated style, I just didn't think variegated or over-dyed floss really worked. They were working with quite solid flat colours. So for example, in this elephant here, this green of the body, you know, there's an outline to it, but there isn't any real shading in it. And even here, you can see I've done a sort of checkerboard shading, and you do get that, maybe not quite checkerboard, but sort of hatching for shading sometimes in the medieval illustrations, but you don't really get subtle gradient of colour, subtle variation of colour. So I haven't given a fancy floss conversion. Obviously, you're free to stitch it any way you want, but I have only given solid colours, DMC and anchor, for stitching this. If you don't like my oranges and yellows and greens, that's fine. You know, you could stitch this in grey if you want your elephants to be more elephant-like. But given that they're not really elephant-like, why not go for bonkers colours? That's what I felt. And I'm just going to say something about the frame. I just had a vision of, for these medieval ones, so the cat snares I finished into a pillow, which I quite like, but I just had this vision of them in these really dark, old-fashioned, huge frames, and then this sort of little glowing picture in the middle. And I thought, how hard can it be to find a small antique frame that, yeah, anyway, hard it turned out. I couldn't find anything in any of the local charity shops or junk shops, or even anything new that I could kind of paint and scuff up. So in the end, I ordered a custom frame. I'll put the link below. It wasn't hugely expensive. I think I paid like about £25 including postage, so it wasn't hugely expensive. It does take a week to come, so you have to be a bit patient. I've done the framing myself and laced it and so on, but I did order the frame. It came with plexiglass, which I haven't used, and it came with sticky board, which I did use because I'd never used it before, and I was like, oh, that'd be interesting to try. I had a very small piece of fabric, which is why it's not very well centered top to bottom, because I didn't really have enough here. The fabric is 40 count Zweigart, and it was originally in Lagoon, which is a kind of greenish blue colour, and I bleached it and then I dyed it with a mix of tea and coffee and turmeric, and you can see there's a sort of bluish tinge here where it didn't completely bleach, and the rest of it is kind of yellowish. I think you could stitch this on any neutral colour background, be fine. Anything that looks like old manuscript paper will be fine, you know, a vintage country mocha, something like that. I think Yasmin's model stitch, I think, was on Vintage Country Mocha. I haven't got that written down in front of me, but I think so, and it looked great. Yeah, so that's what I would recommend. Anything at that sort of neutralish, beigeish, you know, this is kind of pale yellowish, anything that might look like an old book page, I think would work really well with the colours that I've chosen here. So that is Elephantine. I really love it. I really love it. And as I say, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end when I talk about my design process. But let's put that to one side there. Ooh, something just clicked in the frame and I'm a bit worried that I've now broken my lovely custom frame. Anyway, we'll leave that there for the moment. Right, fully finish. I'm fine. It's fine. Everything is fine. I really enjoyed stitching this. So I stitched this with the Roxy Flossco floss that Kerry was giving out at Stitch in London. It's this sort of greyish blue variegated floss that in my head, it didn't have a name. In my head, it's called London Drizzle. And I stitched it on fabric from Coffee Craft Fabrics, who is also at the retreat. This is their 28 count linen. Yes, although it feels quite even weavish to me. But anyway, it says 28 count linen, so let's say that's what it is. In this kind of lovely, slightly variegated denim-y blue. This is almost a fully finished, but not quite. It is going to be finished in this hoop, but I'm going to paint the hoop in a sort of greyish blue to match the thread. And then obviously cut off some of the fabric and lace it properly at the back and stuff. But this is basically how it is going to be finished. That is a design from Happy Mood Point on Etsy. They have loads of designs. Go and check them out. I really enjoy this. I did make some mistakes. This E is too far down, but I was like, I'm not going to change that. And I made a couple of changes too, particularly in the word everything. I really don't like the way that R appears in some script typefaces. So I changed it to be a bit more like the way I would write an R. And there was another letter as well that I changed slightly. I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, so there are some deliberate changes and some not deliberate changes. But it's fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine. I'm really looking forward to having that one up on the wall. Quick stitch, you know, monochromatic. You could do it in any colourway of floss and fabric that suits you. You could easily stitch it on Ada. Yeah, check it out. Right. Okay, so this is the other finished but not fully finished object that I have. And again, if you're on Instagram and you follow me there, you will have seen this earlier in the week. So you may remember I've been working for the last 6 months or so on and off on a project that I've been calling Small and Great, or Mini Menagerie, depending how I feel. It started with this. Let me get something to put behind that. It started with this. So earlier in the year, I'd ordered some fabric from XG Designs for a different project, and she sent this little sample, nicely serged, in with it, and I really liked it. It's this sort of terracotta colour. I can't remember what it's actually called. And it's not very big. It's maybe 6x4, something like that. And I was like, well, I don't want to waste it, but also I don't know what I can stitch on something that small. And then one evening I was sort of sitting watching TV and I didn't really have any project that I was working on. And I just suddenly got into my head, you know what, I'd really like to stitch a bee on there. And I had in my head, you know, I didn't really want a sort of cartoony, cutesy sort of bee, but I also didn't want like really detailed anatomical bee. And in the end, I got out my Emma Congdon cross stitch for the Earth book and had a look through there, and I found this bee as part of one of her much larger designs. And I was like, that's perfect. So I stitched that. And I don't know if you can see, it's got some etoile in the wings. And I also did, instead of just cross stitching, I don't know if you can see this, the yellow stripes on the body I did in turkey stitch, I think. There's a couple of stitches you can do. I think I use turkey stitch anyway, that give you this kind of tufted effect. So it's very fun to stroke. So I stitched that, and then I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with that now. And then I got into my head at some point in the process, I know what I want to do. I want to make a little book of mini cross stitch animals. So that was the first one. Let's just quickly go through. Many of these you'll have seen before. A lot of these are from the same Emma Congdon book, but not all of them. So 3 different beetles. I don't think they were all from this, well, they might have been from the same pattern, but they weren't sort of lined up in that way. I've just put them together like that. And I really like this because actually when I looked at the book, I do love her designs, but there aren't many that I really want to stitch. I don't like cross stitch that tells me off or tells me what to do. Anyway, it's a little frog from one of her designs. But the animals are super cute. This was quite an early one that I did. Again, I'm pretty sure this is from the Emma Congdon book, Little Robin with the Worm. This is one of my favourites, the very, very tiny rhino. That's, I'm not sure if that's 40 count, or it might even be 46 count. Anyway, it comes up pretty tiny. Slightly bigger. I love this. The ladybird is slightly bigger than the rhino in real life. So that was the ladybird. This one is not Emma Congdon, definitely. This is from an X Stitch Mag design, but I wanted to have some flamingos in there. That's the biggest one in the whole thing, and I think that might be on 28 count fabric. I probably should have done that on a higher count. Anyway, that is going to determine the size of the book. Super tiny again. Let's bring that right in. Ooh. This is harder than they make it look in the Flosstubes. Little hedgehog and snail. I don't know if that's going to focus properly or not. Might be too little. Anyway, hedgehog and snail. This one I just did last weekend. Turtle. Super cute. This one I did over the summer, I think you've probably seen before. Sea creatures not to scale. Lobster, seahorse, prawn. I love this prawn. He just looks like he's really grumpy. Anyway, and so then I finished the last one of those this weekend, and I've also now stitched what is going to be the cover for the book, Creatures Small and Great. So it's not fully finished, obviously, and I need to work out exactly how I'm going to put this all together. What I'm thinking is that I will iron interfacing on the back of all the pages. And then the big decision I need to make is whether I want to back the pages with fabric or whether I want them back to back with the stitching designs. Obviously, you can see already it's you know, that's 12 pieces of fabric together. That's already quite thick. If I add in backing and interfacing, it's going to be quite a chunky book. And I don't mind that, but I just need to think it through to make sure that if it's really chunky, I can still put it together, that I can still find a way of putting it together. So anyway, I'm going to interface it, make up the pages, and then bind it all together into this. So this is stitched, so this can be front and back of the book. We'll see how that goes. Watch this space. But I'm pleased to have finished the stitching on that. And if it works out well, I do plan to try several other mini books in that series. I find quite often there are patterns where I don't want to stitch the whole thing, but I do really like 1 or 2 elements. And I think this is quite a fun little way of using up scraps of fabric, stitching little things, but then also keeping them in a way that makes them feel valued. You know, they're not just little unfinished scraps sitting in a pile somewhere. They can go on a bookshelf and not take up huge amounts of room, but still be there and available. So I might do some more themed ones. I was thinking it'd be quite fun to do an alphabet one, where each page is maybe 1 or 2 letters, and then from different alphabets going through the book. So instead of stitching a whole alphabet, just stitch a couple of letters from a lot of different alphabets and make those into a book. I thought could be quite fun. Maybe floral elements, maybe border patterns, and just do, you know, 1 or 2 repeats of the border on each page. Lots of different things. Anyway, you could think, if you're, you know, if you've got a thing that you really love stitching, you know, birds or houses, or, I mean, houses are often quite enormous, but whatever it is, and you just want to do those fun bits of the design, well, maybe think about doing a collection of them and making them into a little book. You don't have to necessarily make it into the book into the way that I'm thinking of. Some people, you know, like to just put those kinds of bits of cross stitch into a journal. So you buy a book that already exists and then you glue them in if you're comfortable doing that, or you could stitch them in, or whatever, and then you make your book that way. So 2 finished objects, 1 fully finished object, 1 work in progress. Oh, 1 other shop update, just to share with you a minute. So I've been working on this for a while. I slightly gave up when I didn't finish it in time for the Stitch in London retreat, but I have now picked it up again. Let's find the... So I have now picked it up again. Oh, it's too big for the thing anyway. So this is by Doreen Jones. It's from World of Cross Stitch magazine. I cannot remember what number, but came out earlier this year. She has designed it to be the cover for a stitch roll. I'm going to do very different insides from her. I'm going to tell you a bit more about what my thinking for that in a moment. Up to about here, so this part is more or less as she designed it, although I've used different colours. From about here onwards, this is my riff on it, because I got bored, because you're supposed to just repeat the same thing and I'm not very good at that. So I was like, well, you know. So anyway, here we have got, I'm not quite sure what that is at the bottom. Okay, oh, I know, it was going to be a spool of thread. That's fine. So we've got a different sort of hoop, different bit of fabric here. This was the same Leo and Roxy floss. After I finished It's Fine. I've only got a little bit left, and it's a one of a kind, so there's no point saving it for something else. So I thought, well, I'll just use it to stitch up some fabric in here. Anyway, and this does mark the end of where this is going up to. So I need to sort of fill in this area a bit more. There's going to be, I think, another pair of scissors I'm going to put in here, and then various spools of thread, maybe another pin cushion up here somewhere. Need to work out that, maybe not. And then lots of skeins of floss and bobbins and buttons and threads and so on. So when that is done, that is going to become the outside of a stitch roll, and so it will fit sort of like that. Let me see where it's halfway. It's about there. So that'll be that sort of square will be either the back or the front. I can't work it out from here. I think it's the front, and then that side will be the back. So it will open up like this. Now, you remember I made earlier in the year this one, that this was sort of supposed to be that one, but I didn't finish in time. So I just made this one using Tula Pink fabric. And this opens up into 3 parts, which have various pockets here for scissors, for a little needle holder, and then here, little thread keep, pockets for work in progress or fabric and patterns, another pocket behind here, these little bobbin holders, and then I put in a ring for flosses. And as I've used this, and I really like it and I do use it, I've thought more about what actually I want from this. So this was based on the Stitching Buddy from Rosie Taylor Crafts. I did make some adjustments to it when I made it, and the next one I make is going to have more adjustments still. So I think it is only going to have 2 sides, but I'm going to kind of put a page in the middle. So one of the things I found is this bobbin section, there's only room for 8 bobbins, and actually I would like more than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a double-sided page like this, so it will have 8 holders on each side, so 16 altogether, and I'm going to attach it in the middle of the front and the back. So you'll have this page, which will still have room for scissors and needles and the needle minder, and I'm going to have a bigger thread bed that I'm going to put it at the bottom, and it's going to open out like that, so it will be, you know, a good 7 or 8 inches square rather than this little tiny one. Pockets here for scissors and needle minder. Big pockets here, which are useful for works in progress and patterns. And then I'm still going to put in, because all you have to put in for this is just the little tab, and then you can put in a floss ring if you want, or leave it out if you're not using it when you want it. So that can easily just go here. So then I don't need this page at all, because I'm going to have a middle page here. So the outside only needs to be 2 sides. When I finish it, I will show you and it will all become clear. But I think that does make it a lot more likely that it will get finished than if I had to do a third outside, which I don't really have room for on this bit of fabric. So then I was going to have to, cut and paste a different bit, and it was all getting really complicated. And actually, I am kind of bored with it. It's been good to pick it up again this week after I finish the other 2 things, but I would like to be done with it. And I think it's much more likely to get done if I just do those 2 pages. So that is my current work in progress. I'm still waiting for thread to arrive for the other thing, which is on hold. I don't really want to start anything else till I finish that, because I will just not stitch on it if I start something else. So I think that is what I'm stitching on. One other thing just to say about the shop. Thank you so much to people who have bought these Christmas card charts. And thank you to those who've shared them on social media and told me that you really liked them when they arrive. I do still have cards in the shop. Just as a reminder, they have the chart inside and then space to write your Happy Christmas. And then they have the floss colours on the back. So nice thing to send to a stitchy friend. It's a little bit more than just a Christmas card. It's also a present. You could make it even more of a present if you wanted to include the fabric or the floss for them to make that up. The price for the PDF chart. So you also get the PDF chart if you buy one of these Christmas cards. I will send you the PDF, so you have all the different colorways suggested in there. On the back of this, I've just got the DMC, but there is also a Classic Colourworks conversion and a Gentle Arts conversion, and there is a second, what I've called modern colorway, which you can stitch this same design in. So you get all of that in the PDF. And you're very welcome to keep the PDF for yourself and give the card away to a friend. Obviously, you can't distribute the PDF, but you do get that. So the PDF is £4. The card on its own then is, the card with the PDF is £5. So I think the best way to think about it is the Christmas card is £1 and then the chart is £4. Or you can buy 3 of these and you get those for £12, UK postage only, UK postage included. I do still have some in the shop, plenty in the shop, but I'm not anticipating having, you know, loads and loads. I didn't do a huge order. I'm not sure I'm going to do another order. If you want them, get them. Don't just assume that there will always be more of these, because there may not be. So that's all I have to say about that. Stitching plans, I do want to finish the stitch roll really before I do anything else. I've got this one other model stitch that I'm doing that I want to finish as soon as the thread comes through for that. That's quite a quick stitch, and I don't think that will take very long. So then what am I going to stitch after that? And I don't want to stitch at this point any more designs for the shop. I just want to stitch some fun things for a bit. I want to stitch the Darwin sampler next, I think, from well, now I'm trying to remember. I know her name, and I can't remember if that is the shop name. I will have to put the link below. But anyway, the Darwin sampler. Again, I don't think that will be a big stitch, but I'm really looking forward to that. And then what do I want to stitch after that? I don't know. It might be time to start on the Year in the Woods pattern that I've got. I am not stitching the whole series of Year in the Woods. I never intended to. I never thought I would want to. I have got the Jack Rabbit. I have got some fabric for it. I do need to buy some of the floss. I think I've got some, but I need to buy some. And I think what I'll do is I'll talk to you next time about my plan for that, because I'm quite excited about the potential finish that I'm planning for that. So I think that might be the next sort of bigger project that I start on. I mean, those designs are so lovely, you know, but I don't have space to put 12 pictures like that on a wall, and I don't, even if I did, I'm not sure that's what I would want is all 12. So I'm going to do one, and I'm going to really enjoy it, and I'm excited about the possible finish that I'm going to do for that. So I think that's as far ahead as I want to plan at this point. In the sort of design works, I'm working on an idea that might be a seasonal stitch for next year, 4 seasonal small pieces that go together, which I think will be good. I need to start at some point thinking about the next medieval menagerie piece, but that certainly won't be until next year. So, you know, there's a few things kind of mulling around, but there's no other imminent releases. But go and buy Elephantine, because it's such a fun stitch. It really is. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this. There are only 6 colours. There are 2 greens, 2 oranges and 2 yellows. It's a really satisfying stitch. Anyway, so I think we're now at the point where I'm just going to talk a little bit about the design process. If you're interested, do stick around. If you're not interested, that's absolutely fine. I will be back in, I don't know, a couple of weeks maybe, with more of the things that I've been working on. Hopefully I will have fully finished the couple of things that I've shown you today, and made progress on some other things as well. So, Elephantine. I don't know how other designers work. I'm going to just start by saying that. I do not know how other designers work. They may do a similar process to me. They may have an entirely different process to me. I suspect at some level they must have quite a different process for me, because other designers routinely use model stitchers. I used a model stitcher for the first time for the small of this pattern. I showed you earlier the small that Yasmin kindly stitched of this. I did not use a model stitcher for this, for the main chart. And let me tell you, if I had, the main chart, this pattern would have looked completely different. Completely different. And that is my main reason why I don't use model stitchers, partly because I'm, you know, I can't really pay model stitchers at this point because I'm not really a profitable business yet. And, you know, Yasmin was really kind to just offer to stitch that for me for free. But I, you know, think model stitchers should really be paid for their time and labour. And I can't really do that. But I also find that when I design, the first iteration of the chart is nothing like the final iteration of the chart. But it's also nothing really like the chart at the point when I start stitching. So I do start with an idea, obviously. And in this case, the idea was very obvious. I'd done the cat's nails. I was like, these, you know, I'm really enjoying these medieval creatures. Let's have a look and see what else there is. Came across the elephants. I'm like, right, I really want to do elephants. So I started by looking at lots of the images I could find online. I'm just going to put this here so that I'm not trying to... I just want you to keep looking at it because I just love the elephants. There we go. You can see both of us. So I started by, you know, Google searching medieval illuminations, elephants, manuscripts, medieval elephants, and gathering, I don't know, a dozen or so different source images to work from these. And then I start sketching it out. I use a program on the iPad called Stitch Sketch, which is like $1.99. It's not super expensive if you've got an iPad. And I like to do it on the iPad because I like to draw with my Apple Pencil. And so I'll start just by sketching in some of these. Now for this piece, I knew I wanted it to be the same size as the cat snails piece. So I set up my chart on the design software to the exact dimensions I knew I needed it to be. And then I was like, okay, I think, you know, these are the ones that I think are really interesting, that are different enough from each other. Do I want them all going the same way? No. So I'm going to flip one round. How are they going to fit into each other? Where am I going to put the word? You know, I had the cat snails word in. And I was like, no, I think I want an elephantine word, but I'd like it to look a bit different. So what sort of font could I use, and how could I make that look? You know, it's not exactly like an illuminated header, but it's, you know, it's sort of reminiscent of some of the type faces, or some of the handwriting, really, we should say, that you see in certain kinds of medieval manuscript. What about borders? And I don't know if you can see that. This has got a sort of checkerboard border. That's sort of the dark orange and the pale yellow alternated. And then in the corners, easy to see at the bottom corner, they sort of overlap. And I really wanted to give that sense of these animals being enormous, and so having them slightly come outside the bounds of the border in various places. So I had all of those sort of ideas in mind, and then I start working out the details, and, you know, do I need to move this one stitch over here and that one stitch over there, and how are we going to fill this in, and, you know, how are we going to simplify? You know, this was a much more complicated design, this section with the people in the towers, and you know, oh, can I fit this in so that this trunk fills in this space here, and so on. So I start doing that. So I have a basic layout of where the different elements are going to go, and then I go in and work out the detail of how I'm going to show the shading or the pattern, and, you know, where the different colours are going to go, and is that a balance, and, you know, do I want all of the elephants to be in the sort of orange yellow colourway with then just the green accents? No, I think that looks a bit boring, so actually I need to have some that are in green. So all those kind of different things. And I get it to a point where it's on the page and I think, yeah, I quite like that. And I'm not immediately seeing anything that obviously looks wrong. So then I start stitching, and on this piece I started by stitching the words. And initially, so you can see the letter here is in the darkest colour green, outlined in yellow, and then it's got this kind of background which goes from the darkest orange, the next orange, the sort of mid yellow, and then it's got the pale yellow around the letters and the dark orange around the outside. I originally had a stripe of green, the paler green, going through that. And as soon as I started stitching it, I knew it was wrong. On the design software, it looked fine, but as soon as I started stitching it, it was busy and cluttered, and you couldn't really read the letters properly, and it was all wrong. So I took that out, reworked it so the whole of the background was in the oranges and yellows. Much better. What else did I change as I went round? Anyway, this is part of the reason why I don't have model stitches, because, you know, the design process changes. I can't remember those. Oh, the pattern on this elephant changed quite significantly. I had it so that it was much more shaped around the body, around the contours of the body. And the more I looked at it, the more I just thought it didn't fit with the style of that elephant, which is so stylized, you know, with these huge long thin legs and this kind of horn of a trunk. And then I looked at the trunk more and I thought, you know what, actually it just looks stripy. What if I try it stripy? And so that's what I tried, and you can see the stripes are not it's not a regular pattern of stripes. And this has got the checkerboard shading on his face and his head and his ear. And it just seemed to fit much better, the checkerboard with the stripe, to give it a geometrical look, but also a sort of, a geometrical look that kind of works together but isn't the same all the way. I don't know. The previous version I had felt much more like it was trying too hard in a way that I don't think the medieval illustrations quite did. So that had quite significant changes as I went along. I changed a little bit on here. I ended up putting in this green shading, which wasn't in the original design, and I really am pleased I did that. I think that works so much better to give that sense of what's happening in the tower. But the really big change I made to this design as I was stitching was to do with the negative space. So initially, this elephant wasn't there at all. It was 3 elephants. And as I had originally done the design, you know, I could see that there was negative space here. I was like, I think it's all right. You know, negative space isn't a bad thing. You know, I was like, oh, should I put a tree in there, or should I put that? No, I don't need any of that. It'll be fine. But the more I was stitching on it, and the closer I came to finishing it, the more I just found my eye was being drawn to this great gap. And I think it's because this gap is a completely different size to any of the other negative space. There's quite a big gap here, and there's quite a big gap here. But actually, they're not a massively different size gap. They're a different shape, but they're not massively different size. There's gaps over here, there's gaps here, but it's all sort of similar. This gap was just twice as big as any other gap, and I was like, it just looks wrong. Went back to the source material, found a different elephant, found one that I thought would work in a really small scale that didn't have lots and lots of design detail to it. Charted a little baby elephant, stitched it in, so much happier. So I don't feel confident that I'm at a stage where I can make a design in my software, generate the PDF, send it to someone else to say, stitch this, and come back and be happy with the result. Whereas if I stitch it and I'm not happy, I can make changes as I go along. Now with the smalls chart, because I had already stitched this elephant and this elephant, and because it's a much smaller design, when I put those together, and I used the word, you know, the start of that, so it just says elephants, and I knew that worked, and I knew this worked, and I knew this worked, and I could see how they were put together, and there's just that one little extra one on top. I was pretty confident with that. And indeed, the stitched model that Yasmin did looks absolutely adorable, and I'm delighted with it. So I was fine with that. But at the moment, at least, my stitching is very much part of the process. And that's why I don't feel comfortable just sending stuff out to model stitchers yet. Maybe I'll get better and maybe I'll get more confident, but not right now. Colour choices I feel much more confident about. Colour is a thing that I have worked with a lot in different contexts over the years, and I feel very confident understanding how colours work together and complement or contrast. And yeah, I don't think I made any changes to the colour scheme from the beginning to the end, and I'm really happy with that. But layout, negative space, pattern, balance, I think I find quite hard to tell online. You know, is there so much detail here and not enough there? Does this pattern dominate because the contrast is too great, or does this fade into the background because there's not enough contrast?